Imagine you go on a work trip and instead of boring meetings, you end up kidnapped by tiny people, attacked by giant wasps, and marooned on an island full of sentient horses who think you're disgusting. This is Gulliver's Travels, the 1700 version of a roast comedy special disguised as an adventure story. Jonathan Swift didn't just drag politicians, scientists, and human nature, he obliterated them. And honestly, it still slaps. Jonathan Swift was a 1700s clergyman, satirist, and honestly, the master of the art of being petty. He looked at the world around him, all the politics, science, and society's nonsense, and said, you know what? I'm gonna write a book so savage they won't even realize I'm roasting them until it's too late. But here's the twist. Gulliver's Travels isn't just about roasting humanity. It's also an epic adventure story. Think Pirates of the Caribbean meets Black Mirror, but with more biting social commentary. Here's the breakdown. Lemuel Gulliver is this average guy who wants to travel the world, but every time he sets out, something wild happens. There are 4 big adventures in the book, and each one is totally unhinged. First, he ends up in Lilliput, a kingdom of people who are 6 inches tall. They tie him up, argue about nonsense, and use him as a weapon. It's basically like hanging out on Twitter. Next, he's in Brobdingnag, where everything is giant and suddenly he's the tiny one. It's all fun and games until the giant wasps show up and you realize Gulliver is this close to getting squashed at any moment. This is how ants must feel around us. Then there's Laputa, an island of floating intellectuals who are so obsessed with science and philosophy they can't hold a normal conversation. Honestly, it feels like Swift just roasted every STEM major ever. Finally, the wildest trip, Hoynemland, where the world is ruled by hyper-intelligent horses. They're elegant, rational, and perfect. Meanwhile, humans are filthy, brutish creatures called yahoos. Gulliver has to face the ultimate question. Are humans really as great as we think we are? Swift's answer? Not really. On the surface, Gulliver's Travels is a quirky adventure story with tiny people, giants, and floating islands. But dig deeper and you realize it's one of the most savage critiques of humanity ever written. Swift calls out our obsession with power, our petty arguments, and our inability to get along, even when the stakes are tiny. Sound familiar? He also takes aim at science without ethics, politics without purpose, and even human nature itself. But here's the thing, it's not all doom and gloom. Swift mixes in humor, wit, and just enough absurdity to keep it fun. So how does a 300-year-old book fit into 2025? Well, for starters, the idea of tiny people obsessed with petty drama, that's literally just social media. Or what about the obsession with bigger, faster, and better? Brobdingnag is basically the world of influencers where everyone's living extra. And let's not get into how Laputa feels like AI and tech bros taking over our lives. And don't act like you don't know a few yahoos in real life. If you love satire, humor, or just a good adventure story, Gulliver's Travels is worth your time. It's weird, it's sharp, and it's proof that roasting humanity never goes out of style. Plus, if you've ever been called too cynical, Swift is your guy. And if you're into deep dives on books that matter, hit that subscribe button. Next week, we're taking on Frankenstein, the goth queen of sci-fi.